accelerating their own destruction.
Should we intervene, First Speaker?
The Prime Directive forbids it, yet their potential is vast.
The signal arrived at 3:47 hours, and the Thesson listening post had been waiting 19 years for exactly this kind of intercept. Deep Space Monitoring Station Kelvor sat at the edge of human-charted territory, its array of receivers pointed permanently toward the inner systems, cataloging every transmission that leaked across the boundary. Most of what it caught was noise, navigation chatter, routine commercial traffic, the mundane hum of a civilization going about its business. This signal was different. It was encrypted using a protocol the analysis team hadn't seen before, layered 3 times, with a structure that suggested deliberate complexity rather than standard commercial encoding. Senior analyst Vithrakal Asen had spent 19 years intercepting human communications. She had cracked encryption schemes that took the Empire's best codebreakers months. She had built her entire career on the principle that any signal, no matter how obscured, eventually surrendered its meaning to sufficient patience. This signal took her team 4 months to decrypt. 4 months working in rotating shifts, applying every cryptographic technique the Thesson Collective had developed across 300 years of signals intelligence work. When the decryption finally completed, the message displayed on the central terminal, and the entire analysis team gathered around it in silence. It read, "Why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side." Vithrakal read it 4 times. She checked the decryption log for errors. There were none. She had her team run the message through 6 independent verification systems. All 6 confirmed the same output. 4 months of work, the most sophisticated decryption effort her station had attempted in a decade, had produced 11 words about a domesticated fowl crossing a roadway. Junior analyst Drev Sorin, who had joined the team 8 months earlier and had not yet developed the specific weariness that came from studying humans for extended periods, said, "This must be a test. A decoy signal designed to waste our resources." Vithrakal said, "Perhaps." She did not believe it. 19 years of studying human communication patterns had taught her something the younger analysts hadn't learned yet, which was that humans rarely wasted this much effort on deception for its own sake. The encryption was real. The transmission protocols were real. Someone somewhere in human space had genuinely encoded a message about a chicken with 3 layers of military-grade encryption and sent it across an open channel. The question was why. She filed the intercept with the Thesson Collective's Central Intelligence Division, flagged for priority linguistic analysis, and requested consultation with the collective's small but dedicated team of human cultural specialists. The response came back faster than expected. Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil, whose family had been studying humans for 3 generations, requested the full transmission file and the complete decryption log within an hour of the report's submission. She called Vithrakal directly the following morning. She said, "I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly. Your station intercepted a triple encrypted signal, spent 4 months decrypting it, and the content was a joke." Vithrakal said, "That is correct." Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil said, "Do you know which joke?" Vithrakal said, "The chicken crossing the road, to get to the other side." There was a pause on the lines. Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil said, "That is, as far as the human archive can confirm, the oldest documented joke structure in their recorded history. Variations of it appear in written records going back at least 400 years before their interstellar era began." Vithrakal said, "I don't understand why anyone would encrypt something that old and that simple with this level of security." Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil said, "Neither do I yet, but I find that very interesting." She requested full access to the station's intercept records going back 5 years, looking for any pattern of similar transmissions. She found 17 instances, scattered across 5 years and 4 different monitoring stations along the human border, of heavily encrypted signals that, once decoded, contained nothing but jokes. Some were short. Why did the chicken cross the road appeared 3 times in slightly different encryption formats, as though someone had simply enjoyed re-encrypting the same joke using different methods. Others were longer. One transmission, intercepted 11 months earlier by a different listening post and decrypted after 6 weeks of effort, turned out to be a multi-paragraph account of a human attempting to assemble a piece of furniture using instructions that the message itself acknowledged made no logical sense, ending in the line, "And that is why I am now an expert in furniture-adjacent profanity." Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil read all 70 N transmissions. She called an emergency consultation with the Thesson Collective's broader Human Studies Division. The meeting included 6 researchers, 2 intelligence analysts, and joining remotely from a human research outpost 3 sectors away, a human linguist named Dr. James Okoro-Webb, who had grown up around the kind of careful, patient attention to detail that his family had practiced for 3 generations. Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil presented the 17 intercepts. She said, "I want to understand what's happening here before I write a report that the collective's intelligence division will take seriously. My working theory, which I want challenged thoroughly, is this. I believe these are not military communications. I believe they are not intelligence operations. I believe a specific subset of the human population has been deliberately encrypting jokes and sending them across monitored channels as a form of entertainment." Dr. Okoro-Webb on the remote feed started laughing. He said, "I'm sorry, give me a moment." He composed himself. He said, "I think you're exactly right, and I think I know who's doing it, and I think the explanation is both simpler and more complicated than you expect." He said, "There's a community within certain branches of human signals and cryptography work, going back generations, that treats encryption as something between a profession and a hobby. People who work in cryptographic systems for their livelihood, and then in their off hours encrypt things purely for the technical pleasure of it." He said, "I'd guess what happened is someone working a long shift on a border monitoring station board encrypted a joke using triple-layer encryption purely as an exercise, sent it across an open channel they knew was being monitored, and then told their colleagues what they'd done. Other people heard the story, thought it was funny, and started doing the same thing." Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil said, "You're saying this is recreational." Dr. Okoro-Webb said, "I'm saying it's almost certainly recreational, and I think the specific appeal is exactly what happened on your end. They knew, or at least hoped, that someone on your side would intercept it, spend significant resources decrypting it, and then experience the specific frustration of discovering that all that effort produced a chicken joke." Junior analyst Drev Soren, who had been sitting quietly through the meeting, said, "That is an extraordinary waste of resources on both sides." Dr. Okoro-Webb said, "From a strict resource efficiency standpoint, yes, absolutely, but I don't think efficiency is the point. I think the point is the joke itself, which operates on at least 2 layers." He said, "The surface layer is the chicken joke, which is intentionally, almost aggressively unfunny. It's the oldest, most worn-out joke structure in human history. Everyone has heard it 1,000 times. Nobody actually laughs at it anymore. It has become, in human culture, less a joke and more a kind of anti-joke, used specifically because of how unfunny and predictable it is." He said, "The second layer is the meta-joke, which is the act of encrypting something that unfunny with that much effort and sending it to an audience who will spend months trying to extract meaning from it." Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil said, "So the joke isn't really the chicken." Dr. Okoro-Webb said, The joke is the entire situation. The disproportion between the effort required to decrypt it and the value of what's inside. The image of a team of analysts spending 4 months on military-grade decryption work, only to discover the most basic joke structure in human comedic history. He said, I'd guess, and I want to be clear this is speculation, that whoever sent the original transmission found genuine delight in imagining exactly the reaction your team had. The confusion, the verification checks. The feeling that something must have gone wrong with the decryption because surely this couldn't be the actual content. He said that reaction is the payoff. Not for the sender specifically, who will likely never know your specific reaction, but for the broader community of people who do this. The story of your reaction, however it eventually gets back to them, becomes part of an ongoing collective joke that's been running for years. Vithrakal, who had been listening to the consultation remotely, said, I want to understand something specifically. You are telling me that humans deliberately waste the resources of a foreign intelligence service for entertainment. Dr. Akoroweb said, I'd phrase it slightly differently. I'd say humans find specific delight in the gap between expectation and reality, particularly when the gap is absurd. A triple encrypted chicken joke is funny specifically because of how mismatched the effort and the content are. The same instinct that makes that joke land is the instinct that produces a lot of human humor. He said, I don't think it's malicious exactly. I think it's closer to a prank, in the specific sense humans use that word. Something done for the pleasure of the reaction it produces, with no real harm intended, but with full awareness that the reaction will be genuine frustration or confusion. Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil said, this seems like a significant amount of effort for a prank with an audience that will likely never directly confirm whether the prank succeeded. Dr. Akoroweb said, that's actually part of why I find it so distinctly human. The not knowing is part of the appeal. Whoever encrypted that chicken joke almost certainly has no idea their transmission was ever intercepted. They sent it into the dark, hoping someone on the other side might eventually receive it and have exactly the reaction your team had, but they'll likely never get confirmation. He said humans do this constantly, actually in much smaller versions. We tell jokes to people who might not laugh. We send messages that might never be read the way we intended. We do things hoping for a specific reaction we'll never witness, simply because the hope itself, the imagined reaction, has value to us. Vithrakal said, I find this deeply confusing. Dr. Akoroweb said, most species do, from what I understand. I've had this exact conversation, almost word for word, with researchers from 4 different civilizations. The chicken joke specifically has become something of a running phenomenon in human cryptography circles precisely because of how consistently it confuses everyone who intercepts it. He said there's actually an informal competition, as far as I understand it, among certain signals personnel, to encrypt the most boring possible content using the most sophisticated possible methods, specifically to maximize the gap between effort and payoff for whoever eventually decrypts it. Junior analyst Drev Soren said, this seems like an enormous waste of training and skill that could be applied to actual intelligence work. Dr. Akoroweb said, I understand why it looks that way. I'd offer a different framing, though, which is that the people doing this are often extremely skilled at their actual jobs, and this is something they do during downtime, using skills they've already mastered purely for amusement. It's not taking time away from real work. It's what they do instead of being bored during slow shifts. He said, and honestly, I think there's something valuable in it beyond the joke itself. The fact that humans will encrypt something this elaborate, purely for the pleasure of an audience they'll never meet and a reaction they'll never confirm, tells you something true about how humans relate to effort and meaning. Dr. Vel Oranthos Sil said, tell me what you think it tells us. Dr. Akorowebs thought about this for a moment. He said, I think it tells you that humans don't always need a practical reason to do something well. Sometimes the doing itself, the craft of it, the care put into something even when the outcome is deliberately absurd is the entire point. We'll spend real skill and real effort on something with no strategic value whatsoever, purely because doing it carefully and doing it for the sake of someone else's eventual reaction feels meaningful to us. He said, I think that's actually a pretty good window into something broader about how humans approach almost everything. The same impulse that makes someone encrypt a chicken joke with triple-layer security is in a different context. The same impulse that makes someone spend years perfecting a piece of music nobody asked them to write, or maintaining a tradition nobody requires them to maintain, simply because the care and the craft matter to them independent of any practical outcome. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. By the end of it, Dr. Vel-Oranthos-Sil had a working framework that she eventually wrote into a formal report for the Thesson Collective's Intelligence Division, titled, After Considerable Internal Debate, Recreational Encryption as a Window into Human Motivational Structure. The report was, by Thesson academic standards, unusually informal in tone. It included the full text of all 17 intercepted jokes, several of which Dr. Vel-Oranthos-Sil noted she still did not fully understand even after Dr. Akoroweb's extensive cultural explanation. One transmission, intercepted 9 months before the chicken joke, had taken the longest to decrypt of all 17 at 5.5 months. Its content read simply, "This took you 5.5 months. My grandmother could decrypt this faster, and she's been dead for 6 years." Dr. Vel-Oranthos-Sil's report noted, with what she later admitted was genuine professional embarrassment, that her team had spent an additional 3 weeks trying to determine whether the reference to a deceased grandmother was a coded threat assessment indicator before consulting Dr. Akoroweb, who informed them it was, in fact, simply an insult about the slowness of the decryption, delivered posthumously through the medium of an imagined dead relative, which he described as a very common structure in a specific category of human humor he called trash talk. Vithrakal read the final report twice. She found herself, against every professional instinct she had developed across 19 years of signals analysis, laughing. Not at the joke itself, which she still did not find inherently funny. At the full picture that had assembled itself across 4 months of decryption, 2 consultations, and 1 increasingly absurd intelligence report. The image of an unknown human somewhere in their vast and chaotic civilization, sitting at a terminal during a slow shift, encrypting a joke about a chicken purely for the theoretical pleasure of imagining a foreign intelligence analyst's eventual confusion, and then never finding out whether it had worked. She drafted a final addendum to her own station's intercept file, separate from Dr. Vel-Oranthos-Sil's formal report, intended only for her own station's internal records. It read, after 4 months of decryption effort and extensive consultation with human cultural specialists, this station has determined that intercept designation KV4471 contains no actionable intelligence. The transmission appears to be a deliberate act of recreational humor, encrypted specifically to produce confusion and wasted effort in any intercepting party. This station's analysis team experienced exactly that confusion and that wasted effort. We are recording this outcome for posterity, because we believe whoever sent this transmission would find it deeply satisfying to know it worked. She added after a moment of consideration, we still do not understand why the chicken needed to cross the road, or why this is considered an explanation rather than the beginning of a more complete answer. Human cultural specialists confirm that this is, in fact, the entire joke and that the apparent incompleteness is itself part of the structure. We are documenting our continued lack of understanding for future researchers who may have better luck. The report was filed. 3 years later, a new analyst joining the Thesson Collective's Signals Division, working through historical intercept records as part of standard training, found the chicken joke file. She read the full chain, the original transmission, the 4 months of decryption effort, Dr. Vel Oranthosil's report, Vithracal's addendum. She started laughing quietly alone in the archive room, in a way she could not fully explain to herself. Somewhere on a human signals station 3 sectors away, a retired cryptography technician named Marcus Webb, who had encrypted a chicken joke during a particularly slow night shift 7 years earlier, never learned that his transmission had been intercepted, that it had consumed 4 months of foreign intelligence resources, that it had been the subject of a formal academic report, or that it continued to confuse new analysts joining the Thesson Collective Signals Division to this day. He had simply thought it would be funny if someone found it. He never found out whether anyone had. That, as it turned out, was exactly the point.